My name is Kate, and I grew up in a small house that always smelled of fresh bread. Dad inherited the family bakery from his parents, and I loved helping him knead dough after school. Mom was different. She was a realtor, always dressed in sharp suits and heels, bringing in more money than Dad ever did. "Kate, come set the table," Mom called one evening. I was 12, gangly and awkward, more interested in reading than anything else. "Coming!" I shouted back, dog-earing my page. As I laid out the plates, I heard them start up again. "Another slow month, John." Mom's voice dripped with disdain. "When are you going to get your act together?" Dad's reply was soft. "Sarah, please, not in front of Kate." "Oh, who cares?" Mom snapped. "She should know what a loser her father is." I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to cry. This was a common scene in our house. Mom belittling Dad, Dad trying to keep the peace. I knew Mom was angry about more than just money. She felt trapped in a life she never wanted. "Kate," Mom barked, "where's my wine?" I scrambled to pour her a glass, my hands shaking. As I set it down, some splashed onto the tablecloth. Mom's eyes flashed. "You useless girl! Can't you do anything right?" Dad intervened. "It's just a little wine, Sarah. No harm done." Mom glared at him. "You're too soft on her. No wonder she's growing up to be just as pathetic as you." I fled to my room, burying my face in my pillow. I loved Dad fiercely, but I couldn't understand why he put up with Mom's treatment. As for me, I'd learned to make myself scarce, to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible. The next morning, I woke to find the house eerily silent. No smell of baking bread, no click of Mom's heels. I crept downstairs to find Dad sitting at the kitchen table, his face ashen. "Where's Mom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer deep in my gut. Dad wordlessly handed me a note. In Mom's elegant handwriting, it read, "John, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving with Richard. He can give me the life I deserve, not this small-town nonsense. Kate, don't bother trying to find me. You're just dead weight I don't need. John, you're a loser, and you've turned our daughter into one too. Goodbye and good riddance." I stared at the paper, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mom was gone. She'd abandoned us, calling Dad a loser and me useless in her parting shot. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Dad filed for divorce and petitioned to have Mom's parental rights terminated. I remember sitting in the cold courthouse, my sweaty hand clutching Dad's as we waited for Mom to show up. She never did. I zoned out as the adults talked, catching snippets like abandonment and unfit parent. When it was over, Dad squeezed my hand. "It's done, Katie," he said softly. "The divorce is final and your mother's parental rights have been terminated. It's just you and me now." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Life got harder after that. Dad threw himself into work, spending long hours at the bakery. Despite being only 12, I took on most of the housework. I'd come home from school, do my homework, then start on dinner and laundry. 3 years passed in this routine. Then, just after my 15th birthday, everything changed again. Dad came home one day, his face a mix of shock and grief. "Uncle Pete died," he said, collapsing into a kitchen chair. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry," I said, hugging him tight. He hugged me back, then pulled away, his eyes wide. "Katie, you won't believe this. He left me everything. Almost $300,000. I'm his only living relative. I don't know what to do with it all." But Dad figured it out quick. He invested a chunk of the money into the bakery, upgrading equipment and expanding the menu. Within months, our little bakery was the talk of the town. Dad hired more staff, extended the hours, and before we knew it, he was opening a second location across town. By the time I turned 16, Dad owned 3 thriving bakeries. Our financial worries were a thing of the past. I quit my school job and focused on my studies. We even took our first real vacation. a 2-week trip to Europe. As the years went by, Mom became a distant memory. Dad dated occasionally, but never seemed interested in remarrying. I didn't push it. We were happy as we were. High school graduation came and went in a blur of cap tossing and teary hugs. I'd worked my butt off and it paid off. I was headed to State University to study finance. The morning I was set to leave, Dad handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked, opening it to find a key. Dad grinned. "Your graduation gift. It's an apartment near campus. No more worrying about dorm life or rent." I stared at him, speechless. "Dad, I can't. This is too much." He waved off my protests. "You earned it, Katie. Now go make me proud." College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of the opportunity Dad had given me. When I wasn't in class or studying, I was interning at local financial firms. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up as a junior financial analyst. My first day at work, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, straightening my laser. "You've got this, Kate," I told my reflection. "Make Dad proud." The job was challenging, but I loved it. Every bonus or raise I got, I invested rather than spent. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Money makes money, Katie. Be smart with it." Years passed. By the time I hit 32, those smart investments had paid off. I owned 2 more apartments in addition to the one I lived in, all bringing in steady rental income. Life was good. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Katie," Dad's voice sounded strained. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." I found him sitting at his kitchen table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, fear clenching my stomach. He took a deep breath. "It's cancer, honey. Stage 4 pancreatic." The world tilted on its axis. "No," I whispered. "There must be some mistake." But there wasn't. The next year was a hellish roller coaster of treatments, remissions, and relapses. I spent every free moment at the hospital or at Dad's house, making his favorite cheese soup, even when he was too nauseous to eat it. One crisp autumn day, I arrived at Dad's house to find him sitting in his favorite armchair, a serious look on his face. "We need to talk, Katie," he said, patting the seat next to him. "The doctors gave me 6 months, tops." "No," I said, shaking my head furiously. "They're wrong. We'll get a second opinion. Katie," he interrupted gently. "It's okay. I've made my peace with it. I'm selling the bakeries. Everything's going to you. You'll be set for life." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I don't want your money, Dad. I want you." He smiled sadly. "I know, sweetheart, but this is how I can take care of you even when I'm gone." The next 7 months were precious and painful. We talked more than we ever had about everything and nothing. I memorized every line on his face, the sound of his laugh, the smell of sugar and flour that clung to him even now. And then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, he was gone. The funeral was a blur. Afterward, I sat in Dad's empty house, clutching his favorite apron. The lawyer had already been by with the paperwork. True to his word, Dad had left me everything. I used the money from the bakeries to buy 2 more apartments. It felt right, somehow, building something lasting, just like Dad had done. A year after Dad's passing, I was just starting to find my footing again. Work kept me busy, and managing my rental properties gave me a sense of purpose. I'd settled into a new normal, or so I thought. Then came the call that turned everything upside down. "Kate, it's your mother. I'm back in town. I'd like to see you if you're willing." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect myself from the woman who'd abandoned me. But another part, the part that still held on to the little girl I once was, couldn't help but be curious. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's meet at Rosie's Cafe tomorrow at noon." The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. As the clock struck 12, I saw her walk in. She looked older, of course, but still elegant. But she wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 17, trailed behind her. Mom spotted me and hurried over. "Kate, darling, you look wonderful. And this is Lily, your sister?" I felt like I'd been slapped. My what? We sat down, and Mom launched into her story, how her lover, Richard, had left her shortly after Lily was born, how they'd struggled to make ends meet, how she'd decided to come back to her hometown to start over. "I heard you have a rental property," she continued, her voice hopeful. "I was wondering if maybe—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I looked at Lily, who was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. I thought about Dad, about how he'd always taught me to be kind, even when it was hard. I thought about the scared little girl I used to be, wishing for her mom to come back. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I have a unit that's just become available. You can stay there." Mom's face lit up. "Okay, thank you. We'll pay rent, of course." I held up a hand. "No rent, just utilities, for now." As we hammered out the details, I watched Lily. She looked so young, so out of place. I remembered being her age, feeling lost and alone after Mom left. "So, Lily," I said, trying to sound friendly, "you're what, a junior in high school?" She nodded, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Yeah, it's weird, starting at a new school for senior year." I felt a pang of sympathy, I bet. "Listen, if you need help with anything, school stuff, or just someone to talk to, I'm here, okay?" Lily gave me a small smile. "Thanks, that means a lot." As we left the cafe, Mom hugged me again. "You're an angel, Kate. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope we can start fresh." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to get a lot more complicated. But for better or worse, my mother was back in my life, and I had a sister. Only time would tell what that would mean for all of us. The months following Mom and Lily's return were strange. Mom quickly found work as a realtor, slipping back into her old life as if she'd never left. Lily enrolled in the local high school for her senior year. I kept my distance, unsure how to navigate this new family dynamic. Occasionally, Mom would call or stop by. "Kate, darling, thank you again for the apartment," she'd gush, her smile wide and seemingly sincere. "You've been such a blessing." I'd nod, uncomfortable with her effusive gratitude. "It's fine, Mom. I'm glad I could help." Lily and I developed a cautious friendship. I'd help her with math homework or listen to her college plans. It was nice in a way, having a sister, but there was always a barrier, the weight of the years we'd missed. Then came Lily's graduation. I attended the ceremony, watching from the back as she accepted her diploma. Mom beamed with pride, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine what life might have been like if she'd never left. The very next day, Mom showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was flushed, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," she snapped, pushing past me into the living room. I followed, confused. "What's going on?" She whirled on me. "Don't play dumb. I know about the apartments, Kate. All 4 of them." My stomach dropped. How had she found out? "What about them?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You've been holding out on us," she shrieked, living the high life while Lily and I scraped by. I felt my temper rising. "Excuse me, you're living rent-free in one of those apartments." "That's not enough," she spat. "Half of those properties should be mine. I'm your mother." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was so absurd. "You can't be serious. You lost any claim to my property when you abandoned us. Remember? No parental rights, no child support." She changed tack then, her voice suddenly pleading. "Kate, sweetie, think about Lily. She needs money for college. If you just sold one apartment—" "Absolutely not," I cut her off. "Lily's education is not my responsibility." "How can you be so selfish?" Mom wailed. "After everything I've done for you!" That was the last straw. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean abandoning me? Calling me useless in your goodbye note? Or wait, do you mean living rent-free in my apartment for months?" Mom recoiled as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, shaking with anger and hurt. How dare she? After everything, how dare she try to guilt me like this? I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I'd known, deep down, that letting Mom back into my life was a risk. But I'd hoped. Well, I wasn't sure what I'd hoped for. As the adrenaline faded, I felt a deep, aching sadness. This woman who should have been my protector, my support, was nothing but a stranger who wanted to use me. And Lily. God! What was I going to do about Lily? 2 weeks after Mom's blow-up, I was grabbing coffee at my usual spot when I noticed the barista giving me odd looks. As I waited for my order, I overheard a snippet of conversation from a nearby table. "Can you believe it? Charging her own mother rent when she's got all those apartments?" I froze. Surely they couldn't be talking about me? But they were. Over the next few days, I caught more whispers, more sidelong glances. It seemed Mom had been busy spreading her twisted version of events to anyone who would listen. Then came the Facebook post. I saw it during my lunch break and nearly choked on my sandwich. My daughter Kate has 4 apartments she rents out, making a fortune but refuses to help pay for her sister's college education. She's forcing me to pay exorbitant rent when I can barely make ends meet. I'm heartbroken that my own child could be so greedy and selfish. The comments poured in, each one a knife to my heart. How could she do that to her own mother? What a horrible person. I always knew there was something off about her. Friends, relatives, even old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them jumping on the bandwagon, shaming me for my supposed greed. Not one of them seemed to remember or care that this woman had abandoned me as a child. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my boss called me into his office. "Kate," he said, his face grave, "we need to talk about this situation with your mother. It's starting to affect the company's reputation." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sir, I can explain." He held up a hand. "I'm not asking for details, but I need you to resolve this quietly and quickly. We can't have this kind of drama associated with our firm. Understand?" I nodded numbly, not trusting myself to speak. Back at my desk, I found an email notification about unpaid utilities for Mom's apartment. Great, just great. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. "What do you want?" she snapped by way of greeting. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, there are unpaid utility bills for your apartment. We agreed you'd cover those, remember?" She scoffed. "Oh, please! You're rolling in money from all those apartments? You can afford to pay a few bills." "That's not the point," I said, my patience wearing thin. "We had an agreement." "An agreement?" she interrupted. "Like the agreement that you'd help your family? Fat lot of good that did us." I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. How had I let things get this far? I'd tried to do the right thing, to be kind and generous, and this was how I was repaid. With a heavy heart, I made an appointment with a lawyer. "Ms. Stevens," the lawyer said, reviewing my case, "you have every right to evict your mother. She has no lease, pays no rent, and you've given her ample notice about the utility bills." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "What do I need to do?" He handed me a document. "This is an official eviction notice. Serve it to her, and if she doesn't comply, we can take legal action." Armed with the paper, I drove to Mom's apartment, my apartment really. My hands shook as I knocked on the door. Mom answered, her face twisting with displeasure when she saw me. "Oh, it's you. Have you finally come to your senses about selling an apartment for Lily's college?" Lily's picked out her school. Tuition's due next month. My shock turned to anger. "Are you serious right now? After everything you've done, you're still making demands?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom scoffed. "It's the least you can do for family." That was it, the last straw. I thrust the eviction notice at her. "Here, you have 30 days to vacate the premises." Mom stared at the paper, her face going pale. Then, without warning, she exploded. "You ungrateful little brute!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the apartment. "After everything I've done for you!" I stood my ground. "Everything you've done? You mean abandoning me? Spreading lies about me?" She lunged forward, her hand raised. I flinched, but the blow never came. Instead, she grabbed the front of my shirt, spitting insults in my face. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing but a selfish, heartless." I managed to break free, fumbling for my phone. "That's it. I'm calling the police." Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. She continued her tirade, her words becoming more vicious with each passing second. When the police arrived, I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I showed them the eviction notice, explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Ma'am," one officer said to Mom, "I suggest you calm down and discuss this civilly with your daughter." Mom sneered. "Civilly? With her? She's trying to throw us out on the street." The other officer turned to me. "Ms. Stevens, legally, this is a civil matter. We can't forcibly remove her without a court order. I'd suggest trying to work this out between yourselves or taking it to court if necessary." I nodded, feeling defeated. As the police left, Mom's triumphant smirk made my blood boil. "You won't do it," she taunted. "You don't have the guts to take your own mother to court." I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but had never truly been a mother. In that moment, I felt something inside me harden. "Watch me," I said, my voice low and steady. Before she could respond, I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, I heard the slam of the apartment door behind me. As I drove home, I thought about what lay ahead. A court battle, more drama, more pain, but also, maybe, a chance to finally break free from the toxic hold my mother had over me. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like I might throw up. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Mom and Lily sitting on the opposite side. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, while Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. The proceedings began, and Mom put on quite a show. She wept dramatically, her voice breaking as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she sobbed, "my daughter has become so cold-hearted. She's trying to throw her own mother and sister out on the streets after everything I've done for her." I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. Then my lawyer stood up, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and confident, "I'd like to present some evidence that paints a very different picture of this situation." He proceeded to lay out the facts: Mom's abandonment when I was 12, the termination of her parental rights, her failure to pay any child support. He showed the judge the documentation of the rent-free arrangement and the unpaid utility bills. But he wasn't done. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Stevens is not, in fact, in the dire financial straits she claims." Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide. My lawyer continued, "Mrs. Stevens owns an apartment in another city, left to her by her former partner. She currently rents out this property for a substantial monthly income." The courtroom fell silent. The judge turned to Mom, his expression stern. "Is this true, Mrs. Stevens?" Mom's face had gone pale. She opened and closed her mouth a few times before finally whispering, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's voice was cold as he delivered his verdict. "This court grants the eviction. Furthermore, Mrs. Stevens will pay back rent for the month she occupied the apartment rent, free. Mrs. Stevens, your actions are nothing short of unconscionable. This case is closed. The gavel came down with a bang that seemed to echo through my entire body. It was over. We'd won. As we left the courtroom, I caught sight of Lily. She looked lost, confused, and my heart ached for her. This wasn't her fault. I walked over to her, ignoring Mom's glare. "Lily," I said softly, "I'm sorry it came to this. If you need help, real help, you can still reach out to me, okay?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Kate, I didn't know." I gave her a sad smile and walked away, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Mom and Lily moved out of my apartment. I heard through the grapevine that they'd gone to live in Mom's other property. I didn't try to contact them, and they didn't reach out to me. As I stood in the now empty apartment, memories of the past few months flashed through my mind. The hope I'd felt when Mom came back, the pain of her betrayal, the stress of the court case, but underneath it all, I felt free.
Hi, I'm Jackie, a 24-year-old marketing specialist working in downtown Chicago. Trust me, what I'm about to tell you is a perfect example of why you should never ignore your gut feelings about people. Jackie, Bob is different. He makes me feel alive again. My mom gushed, her eyes sparkling as she reminisced about meeting him at a chair auction 3 years ago. I forced a smile, but something felt off right from the start. Your mom seems really happy, though, Martha said as we sipped coffee at our favorite cafe. Maybe give him a chance. I'm trying, I admitted. But every time I see them together, he's always there, hovering. Over time, the signs piled up. Mom stopped making decisions on her own. First, her spontaneous lunch visits to my office stopped. Then, even her infectious laugh seemed to fade. "Oh, honey, I'll have to check with Bob about investing in your business idea. He handles our finances now," she said casually one day. That wasn't my mom speaking. The Linda Mitchell I knew was independent, bold, the woman who built her real estate empire from scratch. "Did your mom just say Bob manages the accounts now?" Martha's eyebrows shot up when I told her. "Yeah. And get this, she had to ask his permission to buy a new car. Her old one's falling apart." Then came the phone call from Thomas, my mom's business partner. "Jackie, your mother just signed over partial control of the agency to Bob." She didn't even read the paperwork. I confronted her over dinner. "Since when do you not read contracts?" I demanded. "Bob knows what he's doing, sweetie," Mom said softly. "He has an MBA. "Mom, so do thousands of people. That doesn't mean." "That's enough, Jackie," Bob cut in coldly, his voice slicing through the air. "Your mother trusts my judgment. Maybe you should too." Mom shrank into her chair, avoiding my gaze. 3 years ago, she would have stood her ground. Now she just folded. Little did I know, watching her fade into a shadow of herself was only the beginning. Then came the night everything changed. "Miss Mitchell, this is Mercy Hospital. Your mother's been in a serious accident." Those words hit me like a freight train. By 2 a.m., I was at the hospital, still in my pajamas. Bob was already there, huddled with a lawyer I didn't recognize. "She's in a coma," the doctor explained. "The next 48 hours are critical." "I'll handle everything," Bob interjected, shoving a stack of papers at the doctor. "I have medical power of attorney." "Since when?" I demanded. "Your mother signed it last month," he said smoothly, along with some other necessary documents. I felt a wave of nausea. Mom wouldn't have done this without telling me. "He's lying," Martha insisted when I called her. "Mike's cousin works at the courthouse. We'll check the documents first thing tomorrow." But Bob moved faster than any of us expected. By morning, he had frozen all of Mom's accounts, including the joint ones I had access to. "You can't lock me out of everything." I confronted him in the hospital hallway. "Actually, I can," he replied, his tone icy. "And if you cause trouble," he glanced toward Mom's room. "Premium medical care is expensive. It would be a shame if we had to move her somewhere more affordable." That's when his sister Karen appeared, dripping with fake sympathy and flaunting her designer handbag. "Sweetie, You're just upset, she cooed. Bob's doing what's best for everyone. Oh, and about your old room, we'll need it cleared out. The house is being listed tomorrow. What? That's my childhood home. Was, Karen corrected, smirking. The new deed shows different ownership. Devastated, I called Thomas. They're selling everything, I sobbed. Give me an hour, he said. I've been keeping records. When I met Thomas at his office, my hands shook as he laid out the evidence. Look at these property transfers, he said grimly. All perfectly legal on paper. But the timing, something didn't add up. These transfers were backdated, Thomas said, his voice grim. Bob's been planning this for months. And Jackie, he's done this before. Mike burst in, waving his phone. I found something. 3 other women, 3 other cities, same pattern. Marry, accident, assets vanish. Did he get caught? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mike shook his head. No, the women either died or gave up fighting. I felt the walls closing in. Every lawyer I called hit the same roadblock. Everything looked perfectly legal. The documents are too clean, one attorney admitted, almost like they were prepared well in advance. Martha helped me document everything while I camped out at Mom's bedside. Every conversation, every threat, every suspicious visitor. I recorded it all. You don't want to do this, Jackie, Bob warned one night, his tone as cold as the hospital's fluorescent lights. I've dealt with troublemakers before. Is that what happened to the others? I shot back. Were they troublemakers too? His face changed, a flicker of menace crossing his features. I don't know what you think you know. I know enough. Then you know I always win. Always. He leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. By the way, your mother's insurance might not cover extended care. Shame if she had to be moved to state facilities. Helpless, I watched movers empty our family home. Karen oversaw everything, making sure every valuable disappeared into storage. I left with 1 box of clothes and my laptop. But what they didn't know was that hidden inside my laptop were copies of every document, every transaction, and every piece of evidence Thomas and Mike had uncovered. Bob thought he'd won, his biggest mistake, leaving me alive and angry. Unlike his other victims, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. The money's moving through shell companies, Thomas explained, spreading out documents across his desk. Look at these timestamps, transfers at midnight. Like clockwork. Late nights in Thomas's office became my new normal. That's where I met Diana. She stumbled in one rainy evening, looking exhausted. I saw your posts in the fraud victim forums, she said softly. Bob Turner, he did the same thing to my aunt. Did she make it? I asked. She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. No, complications from her injuries right after he drained her accounts. Then came the breakthrough. Mike burst into Thomas's office, breathless. You won't believe what Karen let slip at happy hour. What? She was drunk, bragging about vacation homes in the Caymans, multiple properties all bought within days of Bob's previous wife's accident. That's when I started recording every interaction with Bob. Sign these transfer papers for the agency, he demanded one night. Why the rush? Market's hot. Strike while the iron's. Don't be difficult, Jackie. Remember who controls your mother's care. He didn't notice the tiny camera hidden in my jacket button, capturing every threat. His entire empire is built on fraud, Thomas revealed after weeks of digging. Tax evasion, insurance scams, identity theft. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was sitting by Mom's bedside, holding her hand when I felt it. Her fingers twitched. Then she squeezed my hand, faint but unmistakable. She's waking up, I cried. I called Martha immediately. Block the door, I said. Mike's voice cut through the phone. Bob's heading up with some lawyer. Move fast. Through the hospital window, we watched Bob pacing the hallway, making frantic calls. Move everything. By the time Bob realized what was happening, it was already too late. The dominoes were falling. I don't care about the fees, I told Thomas. She can't wake up to empty accounts. Mom's recovery came with a fierce clarity. Her first coherent words stopped Bob in his tracks. Where's my checkbook? She demanded, her voice stronger than it had been in years. You're confused, dear. Rest, Bob tried, his tone saccharine. The hell I am. Jackie, why can't I access my accounts? That's when the FBI walked in. "Bob Turner, we have some questions about your offshore holdings." And Miss Turner, an agent added, turning to Karen, "Your real estate license is suspended pending investigation." Diana arrived with 5 other victims' families. Their testimonies stretched over 3 days, painting a damning picture of Bob's calculated schemes. Mike's updates came like clockwork. "He's on every airport watch list," he reported. Border Patrol caught him trying to cross into Canada. The trial was swift. Bob's meticulous paper trail sealed his fate. 20 years, the judge announced, and full restitution to the victims. Mom recovered fully, throwing herself into rebuilding her business with a renewed vigor. "I launched my own marketing firm specializing in fraud prevention campaigns, turning our nightmare into a mission to protect others." 1 year later, I visited Bob in prison. He looked smaller, pathetic in his orange jumpsuit. "Jackie, please," he begged. "I'm sorry. I'll make it right." "Like you did for Diana's aunt? Or the others?" I asked, my voice steady. "I've changed." "Save it," I snapped. "I just came to say one thing. I won. And you'll never hurt another family again." His desperate pleas followed me as I walked away, but I didn't look back. "How'd it go?" Mom asked later. "Exactly as planned," I said, smiling. "He's got 19 more years to think about his choices." Sometimes justice comes from simply refusing to stay quiet. Have you ever faced a situation where someone close to you revealed their true colors, but others told you to give them a chance? Or maybe insisted you were just being paranoid? How did you handle that gut feeling when something wasn't right? My story is a testament to the danger of ignoring red flags. Looking back, the signs were there: the controlling behavior, the isolation, the subtle threats. But society often pressures us to keep the peace or make it work, especially when it involves family. So what's more dangerous? A stranger who means us harm or someone who gains our trust and manipulates us? Should we always trust our instincts, or are there times when we're being too suspicious? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about trusting our gut and protecting ourselves and those we love. Hi everyone, I'm Amanda. Have you ever imagined that the life you built with care could unravel completely? That's where my story begins, my friend. But before I dive into the madness, please like and subscribe to hear more about how I survived living with my husband's psychotic twin sister. What I'm about to share may sound unbelievable, but I promise, every word is true. 6 months ago, my life was perfect. I had a successful interior design studio, a gorgeous home, and a loving husband, Mark. We met when I redesigned the showroom for his luxury car dealership. Unlike other wealthy clients, Mark was humble, kind, and genuinely fascinated by my creative vision. After a whirlwind romance, we tied the knot in an intimate ceremony. Life felt like a dream until she arrived. "Your sister's here," Mark announced one rainy evening. I looked up from my design sketches to see Samantha, his twin sister, standing in the doorway with 3 massive suitcases. I lost my job. "I can't be alone right now," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The depression. It's getting worse. How could we say no? Mark immediately offered her our guest room. That first night, I heard her wandering the halls at 3 a.m., stopping just outside our bedroom door. At first, her presence seemed harmless, but soon strange things began happening. I come home to find the furniture rearranged. "Mark likes the sofa facing east," she said with an unsettling smile. "We always had it this way growing up." My assistant Emily was the first to voice concern. "The way she stares at him during client meetings, it's not normal," she whispered. Even Mark's secretary, Patricia, pulled me aside. "Be careful," she warned. "Samantha's different when you're not around." It all escalated quickly. My design books disappeared. Family photos were replaced with childhood pictures of the twins. "Your taste is so nouveau," Samantha scoffed over dinner. "Mark deserves better." Mark just laughed it off. "She's protective," he said. "Twins are like that." The breaking point came on our wedding anniversary. I spent hours preparing Mark's favorite meal, only for Samantha to interrupt. "Remember when I used to make this for you? Before she came along?" She smiled sweetly. "It was just us. We didn't need anyone else." Later that evening, Mark canceled our anniversary trip. "Samantha needs us right now," he said, as I watched her reflection in the window, smiling. That night, I found her in my closet wearing my wedding veil. "He only married you because I wasn't there to stop it," she whispered, "but I'm here now." Looking back, I should have seen the signs, but how could I have known letting her into our home would start my worst nightmare? Soon, Samantha's manipulation turned financial. She showed Mark our credit card statement, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Do you know how much she spent on throw pillows last month?" "It's for a new client's lake house staging," I explained, but Samantha cut me off. $3,000, Mark. She's bleeding you dry." That night, Mark revoked my business credit card. "Just until we sort the expenses," he said, but I knew this was Samantha's doing. The next day, a woman appeared at my studio. "I'm Margaret, Mark's ex-wife. We need to talk." Over coffee, she revealed a chilling truth. Samantha had destroyed their marriage too. She'd stand outside our bedroom at night, watching us sleep, Margaret said. When I told Mark, he said I was paranoid. Margaret showed me photos of her old home. The decorations were eerily identical to what Samantha had done in ours, same poses, same angles. Everything came to a head during Sunday dinner. Samantha burst into tears. "She's stealing everything, Mark. Our recipes, our traditions, our bond." She clung to him dramatically. "I can't sleep in that guest room anymore. The anxiety." Samantha suggested I sleep in the kitchen's daybed. "Just for a few nights," Mark said. That night, as I shivered under thin blankets, I heard them upstairs, laughing like teenagers. Rachel, Mark's former fiancée, found me the next day. "She'll start wearing his clothes next," she warned. I thought she was exaggerating, until I came home early to find Samantha in Mark's office, wearing his Letterman jacket. "We were supposed to be together forever," she whispered, her back to me. "No one loves him like I do." Then came the final straw. Late one night, unable to bear the cold kitchen, I crept upstairs for another blanket. I noticed a light on in my walk-in closet. Samantha stood there, wearing my wedding dress, the veil covering her face. "Do you think he'll notice if I take your place?" she asked, lifting the veil to reveal her wild, unhinged smile. "After all," she said, "we already share the same face." I backed away, my heart pounding. This wasn't just jealousy or possessiveness. It was something far darker. Samantha wasn't just a nuisance anymore. She was a danger, and I was trapped in the middle of her spiraling obsession. The next day, Emily burst into my office, looking worried. "Mrs. Carter canceled her contract. That's the third client this week," she said, placing another cancellation notice on my desk. I didn't need to ask why. Samantha had been calling my clients, spinning tales about how I was a gold digger who married Mark for his dealership money. But that was just the beginning. "You need to see this," Patricia whispered during a secret lunch meeting. She handed me a folder. Inside were denied partnership contracts and failed business deals, all from the periods when Samantha had lived with Mark. She convinced him to back out of a multi-million-dollar expansion, Patricia said. Said it was too risky. Emily had also been documenting Samantha's behavior in chilling detail. Security cameras caught her following Mark to meetings, watching him from her car for hours. She even called the bank, pretending to be me, trying to access our accounts. Margaret took it further, organizing a meeting at her house. A support group of sorts. 5 women were there, all connected to Mark's past, their lives in ruins because of Samantha. She made Mark fire my entire design team when we were engaged, Rachel revealed. Said they were trying to seduce him. "I found her sleeping in our bed whenever I worked late," Margaret added, wearing my nightgown. Then Patricia uncovered something shocking. During her research, she found Samantha's old medical records. She was institutionalized at 16, Patricia whispered, diagnosed with erotomania and an obsessive fixation on Mark. Their parents covered it up. But nothing prepared me for the shrine. While Samantha was at therapy, I discovered a hidden room in the basement. The walls were plastered with photos of Mark at every stage of his life. Business cards, coffee cups, scraps of old clothing, even bandages stained with his blood from childhood injuries. In the center of the room was a replica of their childhood bedroom, recreated in perfect detail. What horrified me most were the newer photos, hundreds of them. Samantha had been watching us, capturing Mark at work, at lunch, even in our bedroom. In many of the pictures, she pasted her face over mine. The final straw came during an important client call. "Mr. West, you just called an hour ago to cancel the project." the client said, sounding confused. You said your wife was mentally unstable and that I should avoid working with her. My blood ran cold. Samantha wasn't just impersonating me, she was becoming Mark. That night, I overheard her in Mark's office, speaking into the phone. Her voice mimicked his perfectly. The merger papers are ready, she said. Transfer everything to the secondary account. My wife doesn't need to know. I recorded everything, my hands trembling. With Emily and Patricia's help, we traced the account. It was in Samantha's name. She wasn't just sabotaging my career, she was systematically dismantling our lives. She's made him dependent on her, Margaret warned at our next meeting, just like she did with all of us. The other women nodded in agreement. One had lost her business, another her reputation, all because they had gotten too close to Mark. Later that night, I found a photo album on my desk. Inside were pictures of Mark's exes, all involved in suspicious accidents or unexplained incidents. The last page held a recent photo of me, crossing the street, taken from someone's car. Scrawled across it in Samantha's handwriting were the words, "Twins belong together forever." I locked my office door, my hands trembling, and called Emily. We have to move fast, I whispered. Samantha wasn't just trying to separate us anymore. She wanted me gone. I stood at the podium, presenting my designs for actress Morgan Blake's new coastal mansion. The room buzzed with anticipation, packed with media, industry leaders, and potential clients. This was my moment, a chance to rebuild everything Samantha had tried to destroy. These color palettes represent the merging of coastal serenity with modern luxury, I began confidently. Liar. The word rang out like a gunshot. The doors burst open, and Samantha strode in, wearing a suit identical to Mark's. Gasps rippled through the room as she stormed toward the stage, her heels clicking with ominous precision. She's trying to steal my soulmate, Samantha shouted, her voice high and unhinged. Mark and I are meant to be together. We shared a womb. The room fell silent. Morgan Blake's jaw dropped, and I froze, clutching the edge of the podium. Tell them, Mark, Samantha shrieked, scanning the crowd wildly. Tell them how we're two halves of one soul. Her voice cracked with desperation, and for a moment, all I could hear was my pounding heartbeat. Then, Margaret stood up. No, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. We've heard enough. Rachel rose next, then another woman, and another, one by one. Samantha's past victims stood, their faces filled with anger and resolve. She tried to poison my coffee, Margaret announced, her voice trembling but determined. She staged a break-in at my office, Rachel added. More stories poured out, years of manipulation, sabotage, and obsession laid bare before Mark's business partners and the press. Samantha's eyes darted frantically between the women, her composure unraveling. You'll never separate us, she screamed, lunging at me with fingers curved like claws. Security rushed in, grabbing her before she could reach me. As they dragged her away, she locked eyes with Mark. If I can't have you, no one will, she hissed. We'll die together, just like we were born together. Something shifted in Mark's expression at that moment. The spell Samantha had cast over him shattered. Later that night, Samantha's childhood therapist called. She's had this fixation since they were 12, the therapist explained. She pretended to be Mark, date his girlfriends, then destroy their lives. Your case triggered her worst episode yet. The police found Samantha in our bedroom that night. She had recreated their birth scene with dolls, surrounded by lit candles and empty pill bottles. Her suicide note read, "Twins entered the world together. They should leave it together too." She was taken away in handcuffs, screaming about eternal twin bonds. Mark lost everything. His business partners pulled out, citing poor judgment and enabling dangerous behavior. He sent me letters, begging for forgiveness. I was blind, one read. She was my twin, my other half. I couldn't see the monster she'd become. But I never responded. Instead, I poured myself into my work. Within a year, my design firm expanded to 3 cities. Magazine covers called me the Phoenix designer, risen from the ashes of tragedy. Today, as I cut the ribbon on my new design center, the crowd cheers. This is my story, a story of survival, rebuilding, and triumph over darkness. Emily nudges me. Look, she whispers, pointing across the street. A police car is parked there. Samantha sits in the back, on her way back to the institution after another failed competency hearing. She's still wearing clothes identical to Mark's, her lips moving silently. Our eyes meet through the window, and she presses her hand against the glass. I can't hear her, but I don't need to. I know she's still living in her twisted fantasy. This morning, Mark sent roses with a note. I miss us. Please come home. I dropped them in the trash. Some bonds, once broken, should stay that way. Some homes, once poisoned, can never be lived in again. The ribbon falls, cameras flash, and I smile, knowing I'm finally free of the twin who tried to erase me. They say twins share everything. But some things, sanity, love, and freedom, are meant to be individual. I learned that the hard way. What would you do if you discovered your spouse's twin was recreating your wedding photos and wearing your clothes? Would you confront them immediately, gather evidence, or run for your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below.